Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are wrestling with a question that feels like it should be simple, but the moment you try to answer it, you realize you're in quicksand. How do we measure the health of a nation?
It's probably the most important question in public policy, and yet we just don't stop to think about the mechanics of it.
Right, because if I ask you, is your country healthy?
Hmm.
You might point to life expectancy. You'd say, well, people live to be 80, so we're doing great.
Sure.
But is that really it? Is it just about counting bodies and checking dates on tombstones? Or is there a way to put a hard number on the quality of the life being lived?
And that distinction between just staying alive and actually living well, that is the fundamental tension of modern public health. And the answer isn't just medical. It involves history, philosophy, and now a lot of advanced computation.
To help us navigate this, we are unpacking a really dense, fascinating source today. It's titled Health Metrics and the Spread of Infectious Diseases by Federica Gazzaloni. And I have to say, this book, it doesn't read like a medical text. It feels more like a mechanics manual for civilization.
I love that description. It really is a toolbox. It lays out all the instruments we use to, diagnose the world.
We're going to go from a haberdasher in 17th century London who basically invented data science with a quill pen, all the way to modern machine learning algorithms that are predicting the next pandemic.
And the through line is just fascinating. We're watching humanity move from just simple observation, literally writing plague in a ledger, to active prediction. We're moving from counting the dead to trying to hack the future.
But to do that, we have to deal with what you call the alphabet soup. The source is full of them. YLLs, YLDs, DALYs, PFs. It just looks like a Scrabble board exploded.
It can be intimidating, for sure. But these acronyms, they're the language of power.
Exactly. My mission today is to decode that list. Because once you understand what a DALY actually is, you realize these aren't just abstract statistics. These numbers decide who gets funding. They decide which diseases we declare war on, and, bluntly, they decide whose suffering counts.
Precisely. These metrics are the lens through which governments see their citizens. And if that lens is cracked, or if it's ground the wrong way, the policy is going to be distorted.
So let's grind the lens. We have to start at the absolute beginning. The source drops this gem of a fact right in the first chapter. The father of health metrics wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a biologist.
No, he was a haberdasher.
Haberdasher. John Graunt. 1662. I just love that image.
It's a fantastic origin story of John Graunt in London selling buttons, ribbons, fabric. But he had this incredible, almost obsessive curiosity about the Bills of Mortality.
And these are the weekly death records published in the city, right?
Yes. And you have to understand the context. London in the 1600s was a dangerous place. For most people, those bills were just a primitive warning system. You'd glance at them to see if the plague numbers were spiking.
So you knew when to get out of town.
Exactly. They were fear indicators.
But Grin didn't run. He analyzed.
Right. He looked for the signal in the noise. He published this work, Natural and Political Observations Made Upon the Bills of Mortality. And in doing that, he essentially invented the concept of life expectancy.
Just a guy with a ledger inventing demography between button sales.
But he went deeper. He was the first to really distinguish between infant mortality and adult mortality. He realized that a high number of deaths in a week didn't always mean the adult population was getting unhealthier. It often meant children were dying at just alarming rates.
That seems so obvious to us now.
Yeah.
But in 1662, treating those as two separate data points, that must have been revolutionary.
It was the bedrock of public health. It shifted the question from are people dying to who is dying and at what age.
Okay, so we jump from the 1600s to the mid-20th century, and the definition of health starts to change, big time. The source quotes the 1946 WHO Constitution, which is surprisingly philosophical. It calls health complete physical, mental, and social well-being.
Not merely the absence of disease. That's the key phrase.
But that creates a huge data problem. I mean, counting dead bodies is easy, relatively speaking, it's binary. But counting well-being, how on earth do you measure that mathematically?
This is where the math gets tricky. For a long time, the standard metric was something called the QAY, the Quality Adjusted Life Year.
The QAY. This was mainly an economic tool, wasn't it? For cost effectiveness.
Right. Imagine a scale from 0 to 1. 0 is death, 1 is perfect health. It helps you ask, is this surgery worth the money? If a surgery costs $50,000 and gives you 2 years of perfect health, you've bought 2 QALYs.
But the source mentions a big conflict here. The European Commission did this massive study that ended in 2013, and they basically threw the QALY out.
Oh.
Why?
Because they found a methodological flaw with some pretty serious ethical implications. The argument was that QALYs implicitly valued the lives of people with disabilities less than those without.
Can we break that down? How does the math do that?
Well, think about the baseline. If you have a chronic condition, the QALY model might say your quality of life starts at, say, zero point 0.7 instead of 1.0.
Okay.
So, if a new treatment extends your life by 10 years, the math says you gained 7 QALYs, 10 years times zero point 0.7. But if I'm perfectly healthy and I get 10 extra years, I gain 10 QALYs.
So mathematically, saving your life is worth less to the state than saving mine.
Exactly. It penalized people for the health state they were already in, so the field needed a better metric, something that measured the burden of the disease itself rather than devaluing the person.
And that's where the hero of our deep dive comes in. The DALY, the Disability-Adjusted Life Year.
Developed in the 1990s by the Global Burden of Disease Study, this has really become the gold standard.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the DALY isn't just one number, it's a composite. The formula is DALY equals YLL plus YLD.
It's the sum of two very different kinds of loss.
Let's start with the first one. YLL, years of life lost. This is the you died too soon metric.
Correct. It measures premature mortality. The calculation is pretty straightforward. You take a standard life expectancy, the study often uses around 86 years, and you just subtract the age at which the person died.
The source uses a stroke example. So if I have a stroke and die at 50, but I could have lived to 86.
Then you've contributed 36 YLLs to the national count. 36 years that society has lost.
But if I die at 85,
You contribute just one YLL.
so it heavily, heavily weights the death of the young.
That's the explicit intention. From a public health view, the death of an infant is a greater loss of potential life than the death of someone who's lived a full span. It prioritizes saving the young.
Which makes sense. But then we have the second half, which I find even more interesting. The YLD, years lived with disability. This is for the people who don't die.
And this is where the math gets messy, but so necessary. Because death is binary, but disability is a spectrum. To calculate YLD, you need two things: prevalence and disability weights.
The source mentions a technical shift here around 2010. The WHO switched from an incidence-based to a prevalence-based approach. Why does that matter?
It matters hugely for chronic disease. Incidence is just counting new cases. 5 people got sick today. Prevalence is counting everyone who is currently sick. 500 people are living with this condition right now.
Okay, so with incidence, you only see the new arrivals.
Exactly. Think of a bathtub. Incidence is the water coming out of the tap. Prevalence is the water sitting in the tub. If you only measure the tap, you miss the person who's been suffering from back pain for 20 years. Prevalence captures that long-term burden.
A crucial shift for things like mental health or diabetes.
Right. But then you have to ask, how bad is it? This is where disability weights come in. It's a scale from 0 to 1. But confusingly, it's flipped. 0 is perfect health and 1 is death.
Ah, so it's the opposite of the QALY scale.
Yes. With DALYs, we are measuring loss. So 0 means no loss of health, and 1 means complete loss, which is death.
How do they even decide these numbers? Who says a broken leg is a 0.1?
It involves these massive global surveys and expert panels. They give people trade-off scenarios like, would you rather live 10 years with blindness or 5 years in perfect health? By aggregating thousands of those choices, they get a specific weight for every condition.
The source gives some numbers for stroke that are really revealing. A mild stroke has a weight of 0.019. That seems so low.
It implies a really small impact on daily life. But then look at a severe stroke. The weight jumps to 0.57.
Wow. So living a year with a severe stroke is like losing more than half a year of healthy life, mathematically.
Exactly. And you multiply that weight by the number of people living with it, and you get your YLD.
The case study on lung cancer in Germany in 2019 really puts this all into perspective. It shows the difference between YLL and YLD perfectly.
Oh, yeah. The Germany data is a classic example of a mortality-driven disease. When you look at the stats, they had about 821 YLLs per 1,000 people, a massive number.
And the YLDs,
Yeah.
the years lived with the disability.
Only about 1 per 1,000 people.
821 versus 1. That is a staggering gap.
It tells a very clear story.
But does it mean lung cancer isn't painful?
Mm-hmm.
Because that doesn't sound right.
No, not at all. It means the disease course is short and brutal. It kills you too fast to generate a lot of disability years in the data. You don't live with it for decades like you might with, say, arthritis.
I see. So for a policymaker, that number is basically an instruction manual.
Exactly. High YLL, low YLD. You invest in early detection, smoking cessation, aggressive treatment. It's the dying that's driving the burden.
And you contrast that with something like lower back pain.
Lower back pain has almost zero YLL, but the YLDs are astronomical. So the policy there is all about pain management, physical therapy. The metrics dictate the strategy.
Which leads us perfectly into the why. We know how to count the loss, but what's causing it? The source moves right into risk factors.
The global burden of disease study breaks these down into 4 big categories: behavioral, environmental, occupational, and metabolic.
Behavioral is the stuff we do to ourselves. Smoking, diet, alcohol.
Correct. Environmental is air pollution, unsafe water. And metabolic is things like high BMI or high blood pressure, which are often the result of the behavioral stuff.
The text mentions this concept of relative risk, or RR. I like this because it gives you a specific number to latch onto.
It quantifies the danger. The source uses the smoking example again. If the relative risk is 15, that means a smoker is 15 times more likely to get lung cancer than a non-smoker.
15 times. That's a huge multiplier.
It is. But policymakers need to know how it affects the whole country. That's where the population attributable fraction, or PAF, comes in.
PAF, that's a mouthful.
It's basically a what-if calculation. It asks, if we could wave a magic wand and eliminate smoking tomorrow, what percentage of lung cancer cases would just disappear?
So it tells you the potential reward for a big public health campaign.
Exactly. If the PAF for smoking is 80%, then you know an anti-smoking campaign could theoretically wipe out 80% of the disease burden. It justifies the budget. It tells the government, this is the size of the prize.
The source also brings in economics with the Socio-Demographic Index, or SDI. It turns out wealth and education are pretty good medicines.
They are the best medicines. The SDI measures income, education, fertility rates. The source points out that Japan has the longest life expectancy in the world.
Is that genetic?
It's probably a mix, but it's heavily influenced by high SDI factors. High education, high income, excellent healthcare access, diet. Their rates of ischemic heart disease are incredibly low. It just reinforces that health isn't just biology, it's economics.
Okay, so here's where the source takes a sharp turn. We've talked about calculating in the past, but the last section of the book is all about the future. How do we predict what's coming next?
This is the big shift from classical epidemiology to machine learning.
There's this great quote from René Dubos in the text. He says the relationship between humans and microbes is a dynamic relationship.
Dubos was brilliant. He understood that we aren't just passive victims. We change our behavior. The virus mutates. It's a dance. And modeling a dance is incredibly hard.
The source breaks down 2 types of models here, mechanistic and empirically driven. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. A mechanistic model is like the famous SRR model. SIR, susceptible, infectious, recovered.
The buckets.
Right, the 3 buckets. We create equations rules, essentially, that say people move from the susceptible bucket to the infectious bucket at this specific rate. It's logical. It's based on how we think the disease works.
The top-down approach.
Yes. But sometimes, with a new virus, we don't know the rules. That's where empirically driven models, especially machine learning, come in.
The black box approach.
In a way, instead of telling the computer, viruses spread like this, you just feed it tons of raw data, temperature, mobility, hospital admissions, and the computer tells you, hey, I found a pattern.
The source mentions random forest as a key algorithm. I love that name. What does it actually mean?
It's a great visual. Imagine a single decision tree, which is just a flowchart. Does the patient have a fever? Yes, no. Is it above 102? Yes, no.
Simple enough.
Right. But a random forest creates hundreds or even thousands of these little trees, all looking at different bits of the data. Then it has them all vote on the best prediction. It learns from the data's history in a way a human brain just can't.
So it's the wisdom of the crowd, but the crowd is thousands of algorithms.
Exactly. And that's why the whole ML cycle data collection, cleaning, training is so critical. If you feed the machine dirty data, it learns the wrong patterns.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Always.
The source also talks about simulations, referencing cholera back in 1849 and, of course, COVID-19. It mentions using stochastic models. That sounds complicated.
It just means randomness.
Why do you need randomness in a medical model? Isn't it supposed to be exact?
Because a deterministic model says, if A happens, B will happen. But viruses aren't robots, and neither are we. Maybe you stay home that day. Maybe you forget your mask.
Life is messy.
Exactly. Stochastic models account for that messiness. It makes the prediction a range of possibilities, not a single crystal ball answer. It tells us there is a 30% chance of an outbreak, not there will be an outbreak.
So we've gone from a haberdasher in the 1600s with a quill pen all the way to AI forests predicting viral spread using chaos theory.
It is a remarkable evolution. We've gone from reacting to predicting.
But the source ends on a note that brings it all back to the human element. We talked about DALYs and measuring disability, but there's a new metric on the horizon called WAHE.
WAHU, Well-Being Adjusted Health Expectancy.
This sounds like the next evolution of that 1946 WHO definition.
It is. We spent 50 years refining how to measure disease and death, the negative side of the ledger. WAHE is an attempt to measure the positive side, not just the absence of disease, but the presence of happiness, life satisfaction, social connection. That feels so important. Because you can be physically healthy, no cancer, no stroke, but if you're isolated and miserable, are you really well?
Exactly. And WAHE tries to capture that. It asks, how many years of happy life are you living?
That sounds incredibly difficult to quantify.
It's significantly harder than measuring a heart attack. A heart attack is a biological event. Well-being is internal. But if we can crack that code, it changes the entire goal of governance.
How so?
If the metric changes, the incentive changes. Is the goal of a state just to keep its citizens breathing or to help them thrive? Those require very different policies.
That is a powerful distinction. It's moving from survival to flourishing.
And there's one final thought from the text on this. It discusses how our perception of risk has changed over time.
Oh, right. The shift from historical risks to modern risks.
Think about it. For most of human history, the big risks were starvation, violence, immediate infection.
Right, the tiger in the bush. Today, in many parts of the world, those risks have receded, but they've been replaced. Now we fear modern risks, lifestyle choices, environmental threats, economic instability.
So we traded the fear of a tiger for the fear of a cheeseburger and a stock market graph.
In a way. But here's the provocation. If health is complete social well-being, how do we measure the health of a society that is physically safer than ever, but mentally paralyzed by anxiety?
Wow, that really lands.
If our DALYs are going down because we're curing cancer, but our anxiety is going up because we're terrified of everything else, are we actually getting healthier?
That is the question to end on. We can measure the stroke, we can measure the cancer, but we are still figuring out how to measure the fear.
And until we do, our metrics will always be incomplete.
Well, on that cheerful note, no, but seriously, that is something to chew on. Next time you're feeling stressed, just remember, you're still part of the data set.
Indeed you are.
Thank you for guiding us through the alphabet soup today. It's been really enlightening.
My pleasure.
And thank you to everyone listening. We'll see you on the next deep dive. Goodbye.